This podcast is for general information only. It is not intended as a substitute for general healthcare services. If you have medical conditions, you need to see your doctor. Use of this information is at the user's own risk. Welcome to FitRx with Dr. Greg Dennis. Join me as we challenge the standard sick model of healthcare. This is your source for everything health, wellness, prevention, fitness, biohacking, and more. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of FitRx. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Dennis. I am joined today by Dr. Jessie Haymeyer. She is originally trained in chiropractic medicine, but has a lot of other kind of titles as well. She is certified as a functional medicine practitioner. She's also a licensed dietitian and certified nutrition specialist. And so she just helps people actually remotely. She's got a lot of experience with her nutrition background, just in weight loss. And again, functional medicine really focuses a lot on just weight, which we'll talk about. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. So Dr. Haymeyer, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Dr. Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
Yeah. Well, so I was talking to you a little bit before we started recording, and, a lot of practitioners, they are similar to me in that, they started practicing kind of, quote, traditional medicine. And then, like myself, I kind of, saw the light and switched over to, wellness medicine, whatever you want to call it. Sounds like you were kind of focused on that all along, which is unusual, to be honest, with the people I talk to, but that's what kind of took you to chiropractic school. But the whole time you kind of had in mind to do more of the functional medicine type route, nutrition. So just kind of talk about your background and what led you into kind of what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, for me, and I'm sure like you and many of your listeners, I fundamentally found my way to where I am given by the difference this work made for me, right? And, when I started looking at how I wanted to play a role in people's health and their vitality and their life journey, I looked at my own experience, and in particular, a few things that I'd struggled with over the course of years, that I just didn't get answers from inside of the traditional medical model. Now, I got a lot of other great things from traditional medicine, right? I think we've all benefited at many different times in our lives from the toolkit of traditional medicine. And yet, there are things that are just absent of that toolkit. So for me in particular, it was around my weight that I like to say I rode the weight loss roller coaster for about a decade and a half. It was around my digestion, struggling with constipation. Those were, some of the big things for me that I just never found answers going to a traditional practitioner. And instead, over the course of time, how I came to solve those was through a natural approach, was through a data-driven natural medicine approach. And in my own experience, when I really saw, what a difference a targeted natural approach made for me, I just got really jazzed up to make the same thing possible for others. So it sent me to grad school, as you mentioned, got my degree as a chiropractor, got my master's of science in nutrition and functional medicine. And, for over 10 years now, going on a dozen years, I've worked in the space of guiding people in healing using data-driven natural medicine.
Okay. Well, very nice. Kind of explain that. Like, what does that mean? Data-driven natural medicine. I mean, number one, explain that. And then number two, what do you think was the difference for you personally?
Yeah. Well, I'll just start with the second question actually first, and really the difference is it was root cause healing,
Okay.
right? I got to the source of what was causing, weight fluctuations, and there were a lot of different things, and we can definitely get into that. But I got to the source of it rather than putting a Band-Aid on it, right? And it took time, and it took learning, right? I didn't have a pill to take. I actually needed to learn things about how my body was operating. And it took making change again over the course of time and maintaining that change. But ultimately, that worked, right? And then in the way of, kind of circling back to answer the question, what is data-driven natural medicine? In the data-driven approach I take, what I'm really speaking to is I'm speaking to the labs that we do, the actual numbers we get to understand what's at the source of symptoms. The old adage of calories in versus calories out is just insufficient to explain weight, right? There's a lot more going on, and there are common barriers to weight. For example, just as there are common barriers for the people who I work with who are dealing with low energy or are dealing with digestive distress, the same symptoms can have many, many different root causes. So we go in there and we gather the information through labs to understand what is at the source. What is the root cause of your chronic constipation? What is the root cause of your low energy? What is the root cause of your weight struggles? And, that allows me to be targeted in my guidance. Yes, my guidance is natural medicine, but it is targeted. We're not throwing darts. And that to me was one of the really important reasons why I went to graduate school and got tooled up with a couple of degrees, was because I knew what worked well for me and my body wasn't going to necessarily be the solution for someone else. And so, this targeted approach, customized approach really just it makes all the difference.
Perfect. Um, Obviously, all this stuff is individualized, but if you had to say, several of just the biggest mistakes that people make, say when it comes to trying to lose weight,
Yeah.
what would you say to that?
Oh goodness, there's so many so many gems in there. So the first thing that I start with is a mistake that is, well, so we're going to step away from the data, right? Because there are different reasons why that we can find in actual data to why people are struggling to lose weight. And we're going to turn our attention to the environment we were born into, which is really just not supportive of people thriving, right? And so in that world, in what we were born into, we were basically handed two options to deal with our weight. And those are it's the all or nothing approach, all in or all out, right? So it's deprivation or overindulgence. And this kind of juggling of these two, deprivation, overindulgence, is what many of the people, almost all the people who I work with, come to my virtual front door having spent years and probably decades doing. And that's gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight. And, so fundamentally speaking, what we inherited in the way of managing our weight, in a way of really just fundamentally feeling great in our bodies. To me, that's what it's about. Feeling great in our bodies, voting for our longevity, showing up as our best self in the world. That's to me what our weight is for, and caring about our weight is for. And so they've been handed this approach that doesn't work, this over and deprivation and overindulgence. And really that whole approach is born of self-aggression. So, yes, I we bring the science in to look under the hood and see, okay, is the source of your slow metabolism, is the source of that because inflammation's elevated? I actually did my master's thesis on that, how elevated inflammation causes the body fundamentally to hold on to calories. It slows down metabolism. And so, is elevated inflammation. I'm working with a woman who we just got her first round of labs back, and one of her big things is weight. Another one is around her mood. And, there are a few different things we're working on, but her HSCRP is, almost 5. that is going to cause a problem as it relates to our metabolism. So there's, what's at the source physiologically, but then also what's at the source in the way of the perspective we've inherited that, by the way, the diet industry loves because it makes them a lot of money.
So you mentioned slow metabolism. You have a bullet point that, says what are the five commonly overlooked causes of a slow metabolism. You mentioned inflammation. What are the other ones?
What are some other ones? Yeah. So one is compromised insulin sensitivity. So number two is going to be compromised insulin sensitivity, which, as you know, is way different than lab normal, right? Lab normal fasting insulin can be up at 16, 17, even low 20s. I want to see that fasting insulin at 7 or less. And
Amen.
if it's,
I agree 100%.
yeah, right. And so if it's elevated, it is going to affect your metabolism. So compromised insulin sensitivity being number two. Number three would be in the world of nutrient deficiencies and insufficiencies. And a lot of these are connected, but the nutrient deficiencies and insufficiencies, these are things like B12, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, and a lot of these play a role in kind of breaking cycles of inflammation also. So there's some interconnectivity there. But again, with these things, we're looking for optimal versus lab normal. They're two different things. And these are knowable numbers. All of these things are knowable numbers. Number four, I like to say detox pathways gunked up detox pathways. And those gunked up detox pathways fundamentally mean that there are more toxins trying to be processed than toxins are being released. And when that happens, is I'm not telling you anything you don't know, it is a whole it's a whole world of oxidative stress, of free radical production. And of course, that's going to feed into inflammation also. So, there are different ways we can look at the detoxification pathways and the burden of that. And I do that through testing. But, a real simple way is if someone is constipated, we can draw the conclusion that their toxins are elevated because we're not just what we eat, we're what we don't excrete, right? If we're not excreting our toxins through our primary exit routes, our urine and bowel movements, right? So if we're not getting rid of them, then we are reabsorbing them. And then number five is, it's where you live is, hormones being off, right? Our hormones just not being balanced in the way that they ought to be to best support our metabolism. And there's more we could say about that, but I'll leave it at that. I would also just kind of highlight, I actually didn't say anything about the thyroid on this. And it's true that the thyroid needs to be working optimally, but it's rarely the thing that's the sole barrier, right? Absolutely, we need the thyroid to be working at its peak performance. But even in the person who considers themselves lucky, I'm sure you have this too. People will be like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. It's my thyroid, right? People feel like they have the answer. And certainly it's a very important puzzle piece, but more often than not, there are other things going on that must be addressed in order to, ultimately have people lose weight and feel great.
Yeah. I noticed you didn't mention like a sedentary lifestyle. Would you throw that in there?
Well, so a sedentary lifestyle certainly is something we would be in action, like it would be a point of leverage for shifting things. But when I say the commonly overlooked, I'm thinking more about on the physiological front,
Okay.
right? I could talk about nutrition, I could talk about sedentary lifestyle, we could talk about insufficient sleep, right? All of those
Yeah, yeah, all important.
absolutely are real important points of leverage for supporting healing in any one of those possible scenarios.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. So you mentioned you're into a lot of natural stuff, and so you mentioned a natural Ozempic. And is there such a thing? I'm sure people would like to know that. I mean, because everybody's familiar with the weight loss shot, that everybody's on, the semaglutide and, Ozempic and all of those. So is there something natural that can help?
Yeah, there are a few things. So there are a few things. One is, I like to step back and think about how these things work, and they work in a lot of different ways. But one is they slow the emptying of food from the stomach. So the food stays in the stomach for longer. That causes the stomach to stretch and stay stretched for longer. And there are receptors in our stomach that talk to our brain when it's stretched and say, you've been fed, you've been fed, you've been fed. So it promotes satiety, right? That's one way. Also, it's supporting our insulin levels, right? So I start to think about, okay, all these different points of leverage. How else might we achieve that? One thing that we see shows up over and over again that kind of checks the box for many of the different ways these GLP-1s work is fiber. Simply put, increasing fiber goes a long way in promoting satiety. What we're always looking to do is, how do I increase satiety, the sense that I've been fed, I'm not hungry anymore, and how do I dampen the hunger signals, right? So those are the 2 points of leverage that we're looking for. Ghrelin being one of the big hunger signals rather. So how do we promote satiety and decrease the hunger signals? So fiber is going to do that. So is berberine. Berberine is going to be a real powerful tool to use in that. And, I wouldn't make a specific recommendation without numbers, like without seeing people's labs, because berberine is so powerful, it can cause hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, if it's in someone who doesn't need it, right? But, I might be using berberine at 500 milligrams 3 times a day, right? So for someone who has a supplement with 200 milligrams of berberine in it, it's not going to cut it, right? If that's one of the points of leverage for them. Vitamin D is going to play a role in promoting satiety by our supporting hormone receptors. Same thing with omega-3 fatty acids. I would also call out Akkermansia. Akkermansia is a superstar probiotic that I really have been amazed since I started integrating it clinically in these last few years at the measurable shifts it causes, not just as it relates to the number on the scale, but just completely transforming cholesterol panels, hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin, fasting glucose. It's never the only thing I do. I would never just use supplements, but they are just what they're supplementing other things we're doing, right? But that's another thing that I call out. So yeah, to just kind of go through those again, I'm thinking about fiber, I'm thinking about berberine, I'm thinking about vitamin D, omegas, Akkermansia. These are some of the superstars that collectively that can act like a natural Ozempic or a natural GLP and really support your capacity to feel satiated and reduce hunger.
Mhm. Okay. Do you talk about intermittent fasting much with your clients? I used to talk about it a little bit more, don't as much, and now I think it more depends on the individual and, are we dealing with insulin resistance? Are we not? But is that something you usually put into your regimen?
I'm so glad you asked. I am like you. I'm very customized in this one, right? So when someone asks me about intermittent fasting, I want to know, in my mind, I'm thinking of a few things. First of all, do I think it's going to produce the outcome they're looking for? Second of all, then I'm going to talk, if the answer is yes, I'm going to turn to them and ask them, is this something you think you could sustain for the rest of your life? If the answer is no, then we're not going to use it as a tool, because I'm in the game of long-term outcomes. Um, Something that can help them answer that question, do you think this is something you can sustain for the rest of your life, is, does this feel like punishment for you? And I think for a lot of people, and women, I suspect more than men, because more women have a history of disordered eating, maybe not quote unquote eating disorders, just disordered eating. And so it really just kind of kicks off something emotionally that is just not healing, right? It's not an act of self-love. So I will say, for most people, I don't find that intermittent fasting is a great solution. I do find that commonly it does kick off, even if it's on a day-to-day micro level, this deprivation overindulgence cycle. But occasionally I encounter someone who says, I do it. I like to do it. I feel great. I don't overindulge. I'm not eating ho-hos to compensate at the end of the day, right? And if that and they're getting the outcome, if that's true, great. I'm going to vote for it.
Another bullet point you have is you say why 1 year equals one lap, the myth of mastering your weight in 30 days. Talk a little bit about that, if you will.
Yeah. So 1 year is one lap of creating a whole new future in your relationship with food and being a weight that you feel your best. And why is that? Well, in the course of 1 year, you are going to encounter all of life. You are going to encounter the vacation. You are going to encounter the birthday. You are going to encounter grief. You're going to encounter logistical problems of missed flight or didn't make it to the grocery store, right? All of the things that life has to deliver logistically and emotionally, you will encounter in 1 year. And to master this area of your life, you have to master all those things. You have to master what is it for me to honor my health as sacred, to eat in a way that really fuels and nourishes my body, like I'm committed to, in the midst of a delayed flight, on vacation, for my birthday. And by the way, I just want to make sure you listeners get that I don't mean, quote unquote, you eat perfectly. I mean, you learn what it is to bend and not break, right? This is not the black or white. 30 days, whole 30. If I offer any of you $1,000, I bet you can do that. I probably don't even need to offer you that much. You might even pay to do it, right? But the truth is, life isn't black or white. And it takes something to learn and live your gray, okay, it's my birthday. I am going to have some alcohol. Maybe I'll figure out how I have 3 glasses of wine instead of 5. Maybe I'll figure out how share this cake with someone as opposed to eat the whole thing myself, right? Whatever the case is, everybody's going to have their own unique gray zone, but it takes just time, energy, and intention to get clear on what your gray zone is and refine it over time, right? Because, you'll learn along the way, which is great.
Okay. Very good. So I sometimes ask people, you've studied nutrition for a long time. You kind of do this for a living, helping people with their weight. Um, if you will, talk about your kind of personal regimen. I mean, you look good for your age. You look like you're in shape. And I know, people need to understand it's individualized, so there's not like a one size fits all. But, talk about, if you don't mind, your general diet, things you like to eat. Do you have an exercise regimen, like just what you do to stay healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share. And for all of you listening, my encouragement is, find something. I hope you hear something useful in this, but I also really encourage you to meet yourself where you are, right? I have been in this practice for, oh my gosh, 21 years now. So the game I play might look different than the game you play today or tomorrow. That's okay. It's all about your unique journey. So for me, a few different things. I have found that intermittent fasting is not a great fit for me, so I do not intermittent fast. Um, Breakfast is always protein fat centric. Not that I don't have carbs, it's just that I'm going to be more protein fat centric at breakfast because I find the same amount of calories last longer when I do that. Right. So it might be on weekdays, it's commonly a smoothie with some berries in it, and I'm using a combination of collagen and whey protein for me. And putting chia seeds in there to get some nice fiber and healthy fats and omega 3s. So that might be breakfast on a common weekday. On the weekends, it's commonly avocado toast. And usually I'll use like a cauliflower sandwich round instead of regular toast, but sometimes I use a gluten-free toast and a couple of eggs and avocado. That's pretty common on the weekends. Lunch, almost always, it's like hard to think of an exception for me, is going to be a salad with protein and some great leftover veggies from the night before. I love roasting veggies, so I'll use those leftover roasted veggies on my salad. I'll use my avocado on my salad. So that's pretty common for me, almost really every day of the week. I feel great when I do that. And then dinner is protein and veggies. And I do some in both of those, lunch and dinner. Sometimes I'll do a bean in there for the extra fiber. Sometimes I'll do a black rice in there for the black rice actually has antioxidants, the same ones as blueberries. So I'll use either black rice or beans in that in dinner for a little extra, kind of yummy, starchy, and nutrient dense addition. Sometimes we'll do a bean-based pasta with a, kind of souped up marinara with all kinds of veggies in there, and adding some kind of protein, whether it's tofu or, poultry of sorts, turkey, stuff like that. And those are kind of my days.
Okay. All right. Well, very nice. Thanks for sharing that. What about any particular exercise regimen? I know you're in a really tough environment down there at Costa Rica, but
Yeah, right. No, I love movement. And actually, before I went to graduate school, I was the founder of the first high intensity strength training gym in Chicago in 2002. Shout out to Citywide Super Slow, still there. Sold my half and went to graduate school rather. So, strength training is a staple of my weeks. Um, High intensity meaning challenging, right? Difficult for my body to perform because difficult is meaningful and meaningful is required to hold on to muscle. So strength training a couple of times a week, 1 to 2 times, it just depends on the week. And movement, whether that's walking or sometimes I'll go for a mile-and-a-half jog. It's not, before I got into strength training, I was a big runner. I found that I didn't get the outcomes and it took up a lot of time. And
Mhm.
really that amount wasn't necessary for me. Love hiking. As I shared, yeah, as you mentioned, we live in Costa Rica, so we can get some nice hiking in here. And wherever we are, if I can find a mountain, I want to climb it. And I do a little bit of yoga. I used to do more yoga at a different point in my life, but I still do some yoga and I love that. So, movement is to me, it's as much about the physical health benefits as it is not just about the mental health benefits, but yes, but also about, to me, it's meditative, right? Like there are insights and things I learned from my body when I move that I can't imagine getting elsewhere.
Yeah, very nice. Well, you hit all the things there. I mean, that I preach all the time for just, an optimized, healthy lifestyle. And that is clean eating. Sounds like you eat very, very clean. Minimizing just crap processed foods, that kind of thing. Some resistance training, movement. So, I mean, I think you just hit them all there. Yeah, I mean, that's what we all need to strive to do. So, well, very nice. So your website is wellempowered.com. Is that correct?
That is correct. Well empowered, EMPOWERED.com.
Okay,
Yes.
very nice. And so if anybody wants to work with you, they can just go to that website and
Yep, absolutely. And you can schedule a complimentary consultation. I always have people do that first. You can ask me questions, I can ask you questions. We want to make sure it's a great partnership because when I work with people, I'm committed we knock it out of the ballpark.
anything else before we wrap up that you want to throw out there?
I don't think so. It's been a treat being here with you.
Yeah, for sure. Before you go, I always ask my guests to give us one health tip that could make us healthier today. What would you say to that?
I would say I'm going to invite each and every one of you listening to move throughout your day and your week and your month and your year with one question. And that question is, what is my best game right now? What is my best game right now? And this is really an invitation to step into your middle ground and find the pause in the moment. You're 2 drinks in and you didn't mean, quote unquote, to have any tonight. Well, your best game right now is stopping at 2 as opposed to going to 4, right? You're, gonna get pizza with your family, and instead of having, 4 pieces and the dessert, you decide I could have 2 pieces and a salad. Great. You intended to get a 45-minute workout in, but life happened. Your family needed you, work needed you, and now you're stuck with 15 minutes. Great, use those 15 minutes, right? So really be in the looking for what is my best game right now. And I promise you, if you play that game in earnest over and over and over again, you're going to look in the rearview mirror a few months from now and be amazed.
Hmm. All right. I like it. Well, Dr. Jesse Haymeyer, wellempowered.com. Really appreciate your time, expertise on all this. Always a pleasure to just talk to like-minded people. So, as always, I appreciate everyone listening, and we will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to FitRx. I invite you to share this with friends and family. If you would like to contact me, you can visit our website at fitrxwellnessok.com, or you can email me at drgreg@fitrxwellnessok.com.